Okay, my friends, it is Sunday, December 29th, and I have seven big stories. And the big story that I'm going to get to is a possible link between the FSB and this wave of arson across Russia. But before I get to that, let's start with this. The bodies of all 179 victims of a South Korean plane crash were identified. Only two people survived the plane crash. It appears that nothing nefarious happened as far as like some kind of Russian involvement or something along those lines. It was just an accident, and that happens. And we have to keep in mind that sometimes when things go wrong, it's just accidents happen or bad people do bad things. But it was not apparently anything related to Russia that we know of. Nevertheless, Ukrainian President Zelensky has extended his condolences to the people of the Republic of Korea following the tragic plane crash at Muan International Airport on the morning of December 29th. Quote, tragic news of a devastating Jeju air incident at Muan International Airport in Muan County, Republic of Korea, claiming so many lives. Each life lost is an immeasurable tragedy, unquote. So, yeah, and apparently the plane just came down too far. Like it missed the run, didn't miss the runway. It hit the runway, but it hit so far that it couldn't stop in time before it crashed. And that's what I saw when I was looking into this. We share your sorrow and stand with the Korean people in this time of grief, emphasized Zelensky. And that's the right tone. Now, back to the Azerbaijan incident. This is big story number two. Azerbaijani president has officially accused Russia of shooting down the Azerbaijan Airlines Flight 8243. The president issued three demands: an official apology, Russian admission of guilt, and criminal charges for those responsible, along with compensation. Now, the first part just happened, and so Putin actually did just apologize to Azerbaijan over the tragic airliner crash. This is in Reuters. President Vladimir Putin on Saturday apologized to Azerbaijan's leader for what the Kremlin called a tragic incident over Russia, in which Azerbaijan Airlines plane crashed after Russian air defenses were fired against Ukrainian drones. And so, sorry, we were shooting at drones, but there's no, he said he's looking into what's happening in an investigation. So he's not going the next step, but he at least apologized. I don't understand this either. Somebody posted this and said, I'll never understand how this wasn't the end of Putin when the Malaysian airliner was struck down. But then you had the incident back in the 1980s as well, and Russia just sandbagged the world, and same kind of thing. Okay, let's go to the next big story. Georgia. So the Georgian president said, I will stay here. And there was about to cause a real constitutional conflict when the new president was supposed to be inaugurated and she was going to stay in the equivalent of their White House. I will stay here. Georgia president refuses to leave palace ahead of the pro-Russian leader inauguration. So she called her supporters on Sunday, 1 hour before her illegitimate successor inauguration. And what she actually did was step down. And this was good. At the same time, there was this human chain in Tbilisi. Demonstrators lined up along the streets of the capital, hand in hand, on December 28th, ahead of the planned presidential inauguration. And then she did step down. Newly elected pro-Russian Georgian president, sworn in as Salome Zourabichvili. Forgive me if I mispronounce it. I find Georgian names very difficult. Announces her resignation. Quote, I'm leaving and taking legitimacy with me. That's a great quote. What a great quote. She declared, calling the inauguration a parody and a branding the Georgian Dream Party as a Russian tragedy. Great lines. I mean, these are, as far as political rhetoric, I mean, that's easily a 9 or a 10 on a 10-point scale. Very powerful rhetoric. President's speech today. She concluded her official term as president by leaving the palace. Zourabichvili made an offer to Ivanishvili to schedule new elections by today, which the oligarch ignored. Their answer to my offer was threats toward me, which were futile. Their response was cynicism toward you. The answer was repression, violence. The response was actual war against own people. And the response today is the parody that is happening right now, at this moment, in the parliament. This is a real parody, and the state does not deserve such parodies, Okay, and so the two main demands remain the release of all arrested protesters and two, elections in a free environment, ensuring the following principles: vote secretly, non intimidation, as well as diaspora involvement universally. And we must protect free media and fight the repressive system. Yeah, I mean, it's a great final speech for her. The ruling party, which spoke about peace, has waged war against its own people. This is what the enemy, Russia, has been doing for centuries, dividing this nation and society to rule and dominate. Therefore, Georgian Dream is a Russian tragedy. That's what a great line. Russia will not achieve its centuries old ambitions in Georgia. Okay, so there are people protesting with red cards. Remember, the new president is a former football player. He's not really educated, but he was voted in by the electoral system of parliament. And there's not necessarily a bad thing about that, but that's the way it works in the new system now. Red cards in the air as thousands of Georgians protested the inauguration of former football player, Georgian Dream loyalist Mikhail Kavashvili. The closed-door ceremony did not conclude with the habitual military parade amid shows of public support for the former president. Increased violence. Now, this is what could become problematic for Georgia. If they ratchet up the violence, it could become the Euromaidan. If they don't get pulled into that, if they don't decide to be violent, it could dissipate in time, and we'll see how this all plays out. Increasing violence at protests around Georgia today as the Russian-backed government installs an inexperienced former football player with no higher education as their puppet president. Kavashvili, I'm sorry about that, I'm trying, becomes the first president to be elected by electoral college and not voters. And again, that's not bad if that's the system, but the electoral college isn't the issue. The issue here is that the electors of the electoral college, that is the parliament, is the elections were fraudulent. And so until that gets straightened out, everything's corrupt. Okay. Joe Wilson, South Carolinian Republican from the United States Congress, said, next week I will introduce Georgian Nightmare Non-Recognition Act, which will prohibit U.S. recognition of the illegal dictatorial regime in Georgia and will recognize Zourabichvili. Hey, I got it right, I think. As the only legitimate leader in Georgia until such a time as free and fair elections are held. Okay. Foreign Affairs magazine said, since it came to power 12 years ago, Georgian Dream has conducted a masterclass in the art of state capture. They really, really have. Okay, now the issue here is that it's not just fraudulent elections, but this is Russian intelligence activity. So Russia's doing to Georgia through political means what it's trying to do to Ukraine through military means. The U.S. has sanctioned oligarch Ivanishvili, ruler of Georgia, for undermining the country's democracy in favor of Russia with Executive Order 14024. Now, when a ruler of a country is exposed as an intel asset of a foreign power, the immediate question arises, did he act alone? The likelihood that high-ranking figure operated in isolation is very, very slim. And effective espionage rarely functions without an intelligence network. So it's Russia's hand behind this, as it is with many things that are going wrong around the world, like the government of Moldova, which does not recognize any alleged debt to Gazprom, the prime minister has stated. Now, again, Russia's about to cut off power to Moldova in order to create unrest, saying that they owe this money. The prime minister added that the government will explore legal options, including appealing to international arbitration. Good luck with that. Russia seems consumed with the idea of creating chaos. And I talked about weaponizing energy just yesterday in my 3 big stories, which became 8 big stories. But I'm down to 7 today, so I'm doing a little bit better. Now let's talk about what's going on in the Baltic. Gary Kasparov talks about deep concerns for deep cables, but will the United States do anything to defend and deter Russian attacks on infrastructure of the free world? Because Assistant Secretary Jim O'Brien is saying, we are deeply concerned about the damage to the undersea cables in the Baltic Sea. We stand in solidarity with our NATO allies in Finland and Estonia to support their investigation. We're deeply concerned, but deeply concerned means nothing to Russia. You have to actually do something. Okay. This is a translated post in Russian. I don't speak Russian, but what's going on there? This morning, the Russian tanker line made a very strange movement in the center of the Gulf of Finland. The Finnish patrol ship Turva is nearby at a distance of about 5 kilometers and is monitoring the situation. Most ships don't do this kind of weird pattern. So, okay. Russia is apparently planning to cut or damage cables in the Baltic Sea again. A ship of the Russian Shadow Fleet near the Finnish border is carrying out strange maneuvers. Patrol ship of the Finnish Navy is standing by. Uh, and this comment I thought is about spot on. Russia doesn't have any civilian ships. They don't think in those kind of terms. Civilian companies, civilian infrastructure, or networks, everything is weaponized for hybrid operations. The sooner everyone realizes this, the better. Finland is already leading by example. And here's the path of the Eagle S going across the cables. And okay. And that's not where this ends. So that's the Baltic. Let's go on to the next big story. Russian hackers are targeting Italy now in a cyber attack. So Russian hackers targeted around 10 official websites in Italy on Saturday, including websites at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Milan's two airports, according to Reuters. Now, on Telegram, the hackers said that Italy's Russophobes get a well-deserved cyber response. Okay, this is hybrid warfare. Now, last week I talked about this strange wave of arson across Russia, and I showed you incident after incident. More hits keep coming. Now, I didn't show you the one where the guy actually was upset. It was in a liquor store, and he poured gas out and lit the thing on fire, and you saw the woman run out. He actually said he had personal animosity against that lady. So I'm removing her from the equation. But here's another Russian 22-year-old woman setting fire to a gas station with a Molotov cocktail. And here's a 72-year-old woman attacked a government services center with a Molotov cocktail in Kursk. Now, here's the really interesting thing. There are a couple of incidents here where, after being detained, once detained by the FSB, she said that the FSB made her do it. That was her testimony. The FSB put her up to it. And then there was another incident where a 57-year-old set off fireworks in a shopping center in the Rostov region. And when he was detained, he said that the FSB made him do it, promising to return 600,000 rubles, that's about $5,675, that he was convinced to send to their bank account for safekeeping. So it looks like they kind of had some leverage over him and caused him to do that. Now, again, there's only 2 incidents that we know of where the FSB are being accused of this. So take it with a grain of salt. But if the FSB is behind creating arson attacks, what is going on there? I don't have an answer. I'm just showing you what I'm seeing in the news. Now, a few other things that I just thought were interesting. Russian authorities to keep records of people leaving the country as part of the counter-extremism strategy. That's interesting. Russia has officially become a gigantic jail cell in which the deep state tracks all your moves. For example, they will track those who have traveled to another country to study. Sports schools and educational projects will also come under suspicion, as the authorities believe extremists may be hiding behind them. Now, that is possible, but it seems like the timing is odd, and they're doing it more because they need bodies to send to Ukraine. Now, the governor of St. Petersburg has also extended coronavirus restrictions until the end of 2025. I didn't know that those restrictions were still going on anywhere. Tell me in the comments below, is that happening in your country, wherever you are? Because it kind of evaporated in the United States after Putin invaded Ukraine. It was like 2 weeks later, all these restrictions were removed. I just thought this was interesting. Iranian cars are gaining popularity among the impoverished Russian masses. They're not constructed all that well, but in their defense, you could rip off pieces of American or European cars if you tugged hard enough, Japanese cars, but this just seems way too flimsy. I don't know. Okay, Dmitry Medvedev said, not sure why the US, as a country, needs to annex Canada, Greenland, or even Britain. Well, who's talking about annexing Britain and taking back the Panama Canal? Now, let's stop there for a second. These are all because of Trump's statements about annexing Canada or as a 51st state or Greenland or the Panama Canal. But Trump never speaks for precision. He always speaks for effect. Somebody put in the comment, why am I apologizing for Trump? I'm not apologizing. I'm saying you can ignore this. This is his hyperbolic rhetoric that doesn't mean anything. So just leave that alone. Now, what's interesting about this was the next line. There's more civilized way at real Donald Trump and Elon Musk. They could just buy the land, making it their private property. Wait a minute. There's a more civilized way you could just buy the land and make it like he's saying this while the Russians are in Ukraine. It's absolutely mind-boggling. Okay, last thing, my friends, Darth Putin, the parody site, My Troll says, Putin too nice to shoot down an airliner. Media did it. Also, my trolls, Putin will end humanity in nuclear war. Isn't that the way that it feels like they do this kind of thing? All right, my friends, that's all that I have for today. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the likes and the shares and the subscribes. And thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.